I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. Story 1. I woke up this morning engaged. By lunchtime, my relationship was over. And now, as I sit in my car outside a coffee shop, waiting for the woman who might shatter what little hope I have left, I can't stop staring at the engagement ring on my finger. 5 years together, 8 months engaged. How did it all come crashing down in just a few days? It started with a comment. A stupid, cruel joke from the man I loved. A few beers with his co-workers, a little too much encouragement from his so-called friend Paul, and suddenly Dominic, my Dominic, had doubts. Not just about the wedding but about me. And he voiced those doubts in the worst way possible. If you were prettier, I'd be more excited about marrying you. Kyler, one of Dominic's co-workers, called to warn me about what had been said at the bar. He hadn't wanted to, but he thought I deserved to know. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to process the words. Trying to accept that the man I trusted had thrown me under the bus just to impress his friends. By the time I got home, Dominic was passed out on the couch, reeking of beer. The next morning, he made coffee and bacon as if that would erase what he'd done. When I confronted him, he tried to brush it off, said he was drunk, that it was just guys being guys. But that wasn't all. The wedding planning, the ignored messages, the distant behavior, it all made sense now. He wasn't just scared. He was unsure. Unsure about me. About us. I left. Packed a bag, went to my brother's apartment, and ignored Dominic's frantic texts. Then this morning his mother called me in tears. Valerie, a woman who had been kinder to me than my own mother, begged me to meet her. Said there was something I needed to know. Something Dominic hadn't told me. Now I sit here waiting. Dreading. And then my phone buzzes. A message from Dominic. Whatever my mom tells you, please remember that I do love you. I just got scared and made terrible mistakes. I'll understand if you can't forgive me. I take a deep breath, step out of the car, and walk toward the coffee shop. My heart pounds in my chest. I know, deep down, I'm about to hear something that will change everything. And I don't know if I'm ready for it. Maria? The name lingered in the air as Valerie hesitated, her hands shredding a napkin into tiny pieces. She took a steadying breath before explaining how Dominic had spoken of Maria over the past few months. He insisted there was never any physical betrayal, but an emotional connection had formed, one strong enough to make him question our relationship. I sat in stunned silence, the world tilting around me like the coffee shop had shifted on its foundation. In my mind, I pieced together a timeline as Valerie continued speaking. Maria had started working with Dominic around New Year's. I had met her briefly at the corporate holiday dinner in March. By then, Dominic had already begun pulling away, checking his phone more, spending more time with coworkers. I had chalked it up to the pressure of a major project, but now I saw it for what it was, something more. When I asked Valerie why she was telling me this, why she wasn't shielding her son, she teared up. She explained that her own marriage had crumbled under similar circumstances. Before Dominic's father left for Arizona with a coworker, there had been months of detachment, sharp words, and staged arguments meant to create distance. Rather than facing the truth, he had taken the coward's way out. Now Dominic was following the same path. The offhand bar comment from that night wasn't just drunken foolishness. It was a subconscious attempt to sabotage our relationship so he wouldn't have to make the hard choice himself. We spoke for over an hour, Valerie opening up about how she had fought for her marriage after discovering the affair, only to blame herself for not being enough. As we stood in the parking lot, she left me with one final lesson. The hardest thing I learned, she said, is that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't. Anything in between is just postponing the inevitable. I sat in my car afterward, staring at my phone. Dominic had sent 3 more messages, all variations of the same thing. I'm sorry. I love you. But not once did he mention Maria. It was as if he hoped the truth would stay buried. Instead of responding, I called Lena. The moment she picked up, I begged to stay at her place. She didn't hesitate. No questions, no judgment, just a simple, I'll set up the pull-out couch and pick up dinner on my way home. Everyone needs a friend like that in a crisis. Before heading to Lena's, I sent Dominic one final message. I know about Maria. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the full truth. I'll be picking up more of my things tomorrow while you're at work. Then I blocked his number, at least for the night. I needed space to think, without his attempts to explain away the damage. Halfway to Lena's, Karina called. Valerie had overheard a conversation between Dominic and Paul the previous Thursday, confirming and expanding what she had already told me. Karina had made her brother promise to be honest with me after the weekend, but he had broken that promise. Her unwavering support meant everything. I had worried that losing Dominic meant losing his family too, people who had come to feel like my own. But Karina had chosen to stand by me instead of her brother. That small relief was enough to steady me, even as the ground beneath my life continued to shift. That night, Lena's apartment became my sanctuary. A neutral space where I didn't have to explain myself. We ate dinner on the floor, her coffee table covered in a mess of online class papers, while we half-watched a baking competition that neither of us understood. The normalcy of it all grounded me. After Lena went to bed, I scrolled through my phone, revisiting 5 years' worth of vacations, holidays, and everyday moments with Dominic. Our engagement photos showed us grinning like lottery winners. How had we gotten here? How had something so certain unraveled so completely? I was mentally planning my next steps, packing up my things while Dominic was at work, possibly speaking to the landlord about breaking our lease, when a new message appeared on my screen. An unknown number. Hi Margot, this is Maria. I know you've blocked Dominic, but can we meet tomorrow? There's more you should know, just the two of us. My pulse pounded as I stared at the message. What else was there to know? And why was she the one who wanted to tell me? I hesitated for what felt like an hour but was only minutes before typing back. Where and when? Update. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who has supported me through this. Your words have been a source of strength during sleepless nights. I truly appreciate it. Now yes, I'm alive. And some things have become clearer. My meeting with Maria went nothing like I had expected. We met at a quiet brunch spot near the park. When I arrived, she was already there, nervously checking her phone. She wasn't the confident, polished woman I had seen at the corporate party. Her ponytail was messy, her makeup minimal. She looked human. Vulnerable. Shouldn't she have been more self-assured if she had knowingly gotten involved with my fiancé? She kept fiddling with her coffee cup, avoiding eye contact before finally speaking. And what she told me came with two major revelations. First, Maria never knew Dominic had feelings for her until Paul casually mentioned it last week. She and Dominic had worked together, exchanged the occasional after-hours work text, but according to her, she had never flirted with him or encouraged anything beyond friendship. She even showed me their text history, nothing but project discussions and the occasional meme. She had been in a committed relationship for 3 years, and her boyfriend sometimes even joined their happy hours. Second, Paul had been stirring the pot from the beginning. Maria had overheard him at work, repeatedly telling Dominic that he should explore his options before getting married, that he was settling down too soon. That Maria understood him better than I did. Paul had been pushing the idea that Dominic was missing out on his freedom, planting seeds of doubt and fueling the narrative that my fiancé wasn't ready for commitment. By the end of our conversation, I felt strangely at peace. Maria wasn't the villain I had imagined. She was just another victim of Dominic's indecisiveness and Paul's toxicity. Before we parted, she looked me in the eye and said, "You seem like someone who knows their worth. Don't let anyone make you question it." And just like that, everything shifted. My focus wasn't on Dominic anymore. It wasn't even on Maria. It was on Paul's influence, Dominic's inability to take responsibility, and my own next steps. That night, I sent an email to Karina, asking if we could arrange a family meeting at her place. I wasn't ready to be alone with Dominic, but I was ready for the truth. She agreed immediately. Yesterday, I walked into Karina's cozy, well-organized apartment, steeling myself for what was to come. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own story again. Karina ordered pasta and salad from the Italian restaurant near her building. Valerie arrived first, followed by Paul, only because Karina insisted he be there. Dominic showed up last, looking exhausted. The first 20 minutes were unbearable. We sat around Karina's dining table, making small talk about the weather and her new coffee table. The elephant in the room practically had its own seat at the table, but no one dared acknowledge it. Finally, Valerie broke the silence. "We're here to face what happened and figure out a path forward. This isn't a casual dinner." That single statement was all it took to open the floodgates. I turned to Paul and laid out everything I had learned from Maria, watching his reaction closely. His expression wavered between uncertainty and defensiveness, proof enough that he had played a role in all of this. He attempted to defend himself, insisting he was just looking out for Dominic, but Karina cut him off before he could spin it any further. Meanwhile, Dominic sat quietly, staring at his untouched plate of pasta. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued. He admitted that Maria had been kind to him but that he had twisted her actions into something more out of fear of becoming his father. Valerie recoiled at the statement. Dominic looked embarrassed but pressed on. The comment he had made at the bar that night, he admitted, had nothing to do with Maria and everything to do with his own cowardice. Paul had been teasing him about being whipped, so he had lashed out, saying something cruel just to prove a point. He insisted my appearance had never mattered to him. Paul scoffed, dismissing it as guy talk, but Karina didn't let it slide. You were getting married in 3 months, she reminded everyone. That simple fact hit me harder than I expected. I had sent out save the dates, paid deposits. My wedding dress was hanging in Lena's spare closet, waiting for final alterations. And yet, sitting there at that table, I knew with certainty, there wasn't going to be a wedding. I don't think this is happening anymore, I said quietly. The room fell into silence. Dominic started to protest but I stopped him. He had spent the past week trying to make sense of how we got here but so had I. And I had come to a different realization. It wasn't just about Maria or Paul or even that stupid joke. It was about honesty. Or rather, the lack of it. Dominic had been dishonest with me but more importantly, he had been dishonest with himself. And I had ignored the signs. The lack of interest in wedding planning. The increasing time spent with Paul. The emotional distance. I had made excuses because it was easier than facing the truth. But I deserved better. I deserved someone who didn't need a family intervention to figure out their feelings for me. Paul tried to make a snide remark, but Karina and Valerie both shut him down immediately. Dominic looked at me, eyes full of regret. I love you, he said. I was just scared of messing up. You already did, I replied. We talked for hours. There were tears, arguments, especially between Karina and Paul, and painful truths. Old wounds were reopened, new ones formed. And by midnight the decision was clear. The wedding was cancelled. Not in a fiery fight. Not with dramatic exits or ultimatums. Just the quiet realization that something between us had broken beyond repair. Trust. And it wasn't something that could be rebuilt in 3 months. Not with Maria still working at his company. Not with Paul's voice still in his ear. Not with that lingering doubt hanging over everything. Karina drove me back to Lena's that night. As we pulled up to the building she turned to me and said, "This doesn't change anything. You're still family, to me, to my mom. No matter what Dominic did." It was one of the kindest things anyone had ever said to me. Back in Lena's apartment, I sat in the dark on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling. 5 years. Gone. My wedding canceled. My future uncertain. And yet, I didn't cry right away. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and made a list. Call the venue to cancel. Deposit is probably gone. Return the ring. Contact guests. Start looking for a new place. Change relationship status. At around 2 a.m., Lena shuffled out of her room. She must have heard me come in and wanted to check on me. Without a word, she sat beside me on the pull-out couch and threw an arm around my shoulders. "The wedding's off," I whispered. She didn't say anything, just held me. We sat like that until daylight. No forced conversation, no empty reassurances. Just existing in the reality of it all. This morning, Dominic texted, asking to meet so we could sort out the apartment lease, separate our accounts, and decide what to do with our shared furniture. So mature. So final. Elliot, my brother, also reached out, asking when he could come over to help me pack. Ever the practical one. My mom called next, wanting to know if she should cancel her flight. Apparently, one of my relatives had already seen the news on Karina's Instagram. And through it all, I found myself twisting the engagement ring around my finger. A nervous habit I hadn't even realized I had. It wasn't a flashy ring. Just a simple round diamond on a white gold band. Dominic had chosen it because he said it suited our relationship. Classic and timeless. Now it felt unbearably heavy. The venue coordinator was kind but firm when I called. The deposit, $8,000, was non-refundable this close to the date. A year's worth of saving, cutting back on trips and nights out, gone in an instant. My rational side cringed at the financial loss, but my emotional side barely registered it. Karina texted me later, saying she had found a photographer who might be willing to transfer our deposit to a future event. Valerie promised to inform extended family so I wouldn't have to deal with uncomfortable questions. Small kindnesses, but they meant everything. Paul, unsurprisingly, sent a dismissive text. "Things happen for a reason. You'll find someone better." I deleted it without responding. Maria, on the other hand, sent a short message. She apologized again and reassured me that nothing had ever happened between her and Dominic. Strangely enough, I believed her. Dominic's insecurities and Paul's meddling had dragged her into this mess as collateral damage. But the hardest part? The little reminders. My wedding planning binder still sitting in my tote bag. The Spotify playlist I had made for the reception. The honeymoon research folder still open on my laptop. A lost future scattered in small, painful pieces. Against Lena's advice, I went to work today. She told me to take a mental health day, but staying home meant overthinking. And honestly, I'd rather be exhausted than stuck in my own head. 3 months. That's how long it's been since my world shifted. 3 months of learning how to exist on my own terms. And yet, standing in the middle of the grocery store, staring blankly at a display of cereal while our song played over the speakers, I realized that grief isn't linear. I didn't cry. I didn't rush out of the store. I just stood there, letting the melody wash over me, feeling the ache but also the absence of devastation. Maybe that's progress. Now, as I sit on the balcony of the honeymoon cabin, the one meant for two but occupied only by me, I feel something I never expected: peace. The first few days were strange. I kept glancing at the empty chair across from me at breakfast, catching myself reaching for my phone to text Dominic about something trivial before remembering there was no need. But then something shifted. I woke up to the sound of waves without an alarm. I took long walks without a destination. I read an entire novel in one sitting the way I used to before life got so tangled. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. On the last night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I took out the engagement ring from my bag. I had brought it with me, unsure why. Maybe for closure. Maybe just to see how it felt here in a place untouched by the past. I held it up to the fading light, watching it catch the last golden rays, and then, without a grand gesture, without a dramatic farewell, I placed it back in its box. Maybe I'd sell it one day. Maybe not. But for now it didn't hold power over me anymore. I used to think my future was a straight line, a carefully plotted course leading to marriage, a house, children. But now I see it for what it really is, an open road, winding and unpredictable, but mine to navigate. Tomorrow I go home. Not to our home, but to mine. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.